All right, guys, let's talk O-line. I apologize. Let's talk O-line as we wrap up the show here this week. And I know it's not the most glamorous position, but I maintain that it's probably the biggest weakness for this Buckeyes team going into next season. And there were some interesting things that came out of the spring game. What I'll say is the left side of the offensive line seems set in stone. I don't think anything's changing with Josh Simons and Donovan Jackson. I think those two guys are set. And that's actually the side of the offensive line I think is not a problem. Like, I'm not worried about that group whatsoever. From everything I've read, everything I've seen from camp, all these different things, Seth McLaughlin seems to be the front runner at center, and that makes a lot of sense. I'm assuming that stays true to form. And the only thing I worry about with Seth McLaughlin is the low snaps, because Nick and I have talked about this. Like, okay, yes, on one hand, maybe there was an issue with the communication between him and the quarterback that was referenced by Ryan Day at one point during the spring. But you would think by the end of the season they'd have that worked out. And it also seemed like those moments where he botched the snaps were coming in pivotal moments of games. And I don't want that. So I'm a little bit nervous about that, but I do think Seth McLaughlin is a fine center, and I'm perfectly fine with him being the starter there. Now, the right side is where things get a little bit interesting, because there's kind of a competition going on where they've moved Josh Fryer around from right tackle to right guard. Tegra Shabola has been playing guard and tackle, and Luke Montgomery's got some run there, and Carson Hinsman's got some play at guard as well. And I think based off of the spring game, I know there was several series where it looked like the Buckeyes were running Josh Fryer as the guard at the tackle spot, and then the competition feels like it's going to end up coming down to who's going to be that right guard between Hinsman, Tegra, and potentially Luke Montgomery. Montgomery was this highly touted prospect coming out of high school that everyone was excited about, sort of being the next great offensive lineman here at Ohio State. And as he kind of enters his redshirt sophomore season, I don't know that he's still necessarily ready. I think Tegra seems to be getting some run next to Fryer from what I've read and seen, where maybe he gets that job as a sophomore. And then Hinsman, because he's not going to be playing center because of the presence of Seth McLaughlin, maybe he's the guy that ends up winning it out. But it feels like it's coming down to the right guard spot being the one that still has to be truly settled, with Fryer maybe assuming the right tackle job. But guys, like, I don't know. From everything I understand about last year with this offensive line, and we saw it in games, we saw it play out in games. Like, it just seemed like they never got into sync the way you expect. Go back to the years with like Zeke Elliott running the football, and it's like those offensive line units were they were a unit. Like, they were in sync. They knew what each guy was going to be doing, and they were just so productive and so physical that you never worried about that phase of the game for this team. And because of what's happened in recent years, you worry about that with this group. And I do think there still are some questions there about how this group kind of comes together. Now, you got Chip Kelly there, and I think that can't be understated. Like, you have this offense coordinator who's making it his sole purpose to focus on offense, to get this offense humming and use the talents that are on the team to put out this incredible high-flying offense. I think there's going to be a little bit more, because Ryan Day's talked about this, right? Like, just with the way college football is, and him stepping back and having to assume this more of this CEO type role. I think that he wasn't able to necessarily sit down and really get to like the nitty gritty of what he wants guys to do, and he couldn't work with those guys as much. Now you have somebody who's strictly coming in to handle the offense, and I think that Chip Kelly getting his hands on these guys, along with Justin Fry, who I've had questions about in terms of what he's building. But you had the one thing I'll give Justin Fry credit for. Crying is what I've been doing about Justin Fry. is that it seems like the guys got better last year. Like there was improvements to their game up front. And I think that is an important note here. But we know in the sport, like a lot of it does come down to recruiting, but the coaching side of it matters. And so the fact that he's back, I think, speaks to his ability to coach these guys up and help them improve their games. And I think with a lot of these guys coming back from last year, you'll see them hopefully take that next step with Fry's guidance, and now with Chip Kelly integrated into it as well. But with a strictly offensive focused coordinator who isn't Ryan Day just calling the plays, I think they get a little bit more of a hands-on experience, and that I think matters. So that's some good news for this group moving forward. But I think there are still questions, and I think that they're lesser than what they were last year, but they still exist. And with this in mind, and the reason I wanted to kind of get to the quarterback situation in regards to the offensive line, as we all sort of have our theories on whether or not it's a true quarterback competition or not. And Devin Brown had an equally good spring game as Will Howard, and we feel pretty good about the idea that maybe I think Nick and I have kind of are more reserved to the idea that they've been trying to give Devin Brown reps in case he wanted to transfer, but he stuck it out. Which, by the way, I am as shocked as anybody that none of these quarterbacks transferred during the spring window. Like the fact that they kept this entire group, 5 quarterbacks, intact entirely is pretty damn remarkable, all things considered, because this is one of maybe the most talented quarterback room in the country. And they all know that they're all not going to be starters next year. Like somebody's going to miss it. And Will Howard kind of has the leg up in the clubhouse, I think, right now. But yeah, I do think that part of the reason why another reason I should say, why I lean Will Howard in this competition, again, doing air quotes, is because I think that because the offensive line is still leaving you with questions and some doubts, and there's still some spots to sort of nail down before they get into summer camp and build up and get start counting down to the season with what they want the depth chart to look like along in the trenches. I think that they know they can trust Will Howard to handle some of the nuances of what this group is going to bring to the table. And by nuances, really, I just mean if something breaks down, if there's pressure, he's going to know how to handle that and get out of it. And he's mobile to a level that he's done it at the college, in the college game throughout his career, where I think they probably trust him a little bit more than they trust any other freshman, maybe even than they trust Devin Brown and Keenholtz to be able to handle it. So I think that is another sort of notch in Will Howard's resume that helps him in the cause of trying to win the starting job, if it's a true competition like they're saying to us, because I just think he is going to be able to handle some of the problems that could pop up with this group. Like, no, you're not going to turn the offensive line around overnight. I was kind of surprised they weren't more involved. I haven't seen, and maybe I just missed it, but I haven't seen them linked to anybody in the transfer portal at this point along the offensive line. And that's okay. It's not the end of the world. And I understand like the big names, your Caden Proctors of the world, those guys obviously weren't coming to Ohio State. They already had some things kind of nailed down. And so the top names, your 5-star recruit type talents, they have their own, they made their own decisions, and they're back wherever they are. They transfer where they are, and they're not necessarily coming to Ohio State at this point. There are still some names out there that I guess intrigue me to an extent that I could see Ohio State potentially still pursuing. But I think given how spring went, and given the fact that you haven't heard them linked to anything notable along the offensive line specifically, I think they seem pretty complacent or pretty content with just running it out with the group that they have currently on the roster. And they'll sort this thing out in camp, get an offensive line. They keep talking about playing the best 5. I think they're still trying to figure out who those best 5 are, and we'll probably know more of that once camp, starts and breaks and the season's here. So I don't even think they have an answer to that yet. but it seems like they're pretty content with that. And because they're content with that, I think I have to be content. And that content's not the right word. I want to be fair to Will Howard here, because I did think that was a solid addition through the portal to get not necessarily the top quarterback I wanted in the portal, but I think it's a veteran guy who has a certain demeanor to him and is going to be able to navigate the pocket and some of the things that could break down up front as you maybe test out different guys throughout the season, or just, have a weak link there. He seems more equipped to handle that than some of the other guys. Devin Brown doesn't have the experience yet, and I understand people really like him, and there's some poise about him, and there's been a lot of talking him up this spring, but I just don't know if he's ready for that. And I certainly don't think any of the freshman guys, not Keen Holtz, and Aaron Noland and Julian Sayin are ready for that as well. So it's again, as I assess the situation, I think it's better than last year, and that should mean something for Buckeyes fans, and that it should mean that they're better from last year and that Justin Fry's coaching is getting through to them. I'm still a little bit worried about it, but I do think it adds to just the if you're looking for like a pros and cons of who's going to win the starting quarterback job, or you're looking for like the reasons, the answers to that question specifically, and who really is the front runner, I think is another reason why Will Howard ends up making the most sense when push comes to shove, and this entire ordeal is being wrapped up before the season starts and they actually name a starter. I think they're just going to ultimately have more faith that Will Howard's going to be able to handle those things better because he's a veteran presence in this group. What do you think about the offensive line and the state of it? Were you surprised that Ohio State wasn't linked to more offensive line transfers during the spring window? And what does it mean, you think, for the quarterback competition? I keep using air quotes that Ohio State kind of has brewing. Is it another reason why Will Howard should be the guy leading this group next season? Guys, before we get out of here, I want to shout out some praise to Qunishon Judkins. This was interesting because Qunishon Judkins, and I first of all, I want to give him his props because he donated $10,000 to his high school, Pike Road High School, which is based out of Alabama, to help their football program. And he said that for every touchdown he scores, he will also donate another $1,000. Actually, I take that back. He's not donating it to his high school program. The $1,000 he'll donate for every touchdown he scores is going to go to the Alabama Kidney Foundation. So this is an interesting thing because, and this is a byproduct of the NIL era, mind you. Now that guys are making money, now that guys are getting paid for their likeness and for their ability to go out and sign autographs and to come to schools and sponsorship deals and all these different things, this is a very we talk so much about how it's ruining college football, and I can't believe, like, this isn't the college football I grew up in. This isn't my dad's college football. This is my grandfather's college football. Oh, what are we doing to these kids? All this different stuff. I don't say that. Nick doesn't say that, but those who do say that, that's one of the big negatives about it. This is, I think, a positive byproduct of that. Players at this age, at this point in their careers, as just ripe young college students, are donating money, giving to good causes, giving to charity. I think that's a cool thing to see. So shout out to Qunishon Judkins. Props to him. And let's hope he scores a lot of touchdowns so he's donating a lot of money to the Alabama Kidney Foundation. Although, I don't know we don't know the specifics of what all these players are making. You hear some of the rumors about Ohio State's salary cap going up and all the money that's been thrown around and all the money that total they've spent on bringing kids in through the NIL stuff. But I don't know how much specifically Qunishon Judkins is making, but I wonder if he's going to maybe contemplate if he gets too high of a touchdown total, sliding down the 1 yard line a little bit more and letting Trayvon Henderson finish the job so that he doesn't have to give all his money away. But if the money's good, maybe he doesn't care. If the money's good, the money's good. Good props to him for that. So I thought that was cool, though, and I want to give him a shout out. But guys, as always, we appreciate you listening. Nick should be back next week. I actually have a fun topic for next week. This new look Big Ten, right? We know Michigan will always be rival number one. That ain't changing anytime soon. Probably never. Who is the Buckeyes' biggest rival in the Big Ten outside of Michigan? With the way it's kind of been restructured and redone in recent years. We'll talk about that next week with when Nick returns. Very much looking forward to it. So in the meantime, I implore you to like, follow, subscribe, Sons of the Shoe in Apple Podcasts, the Odyssey app. Did I mention Apple Podcasts? And of course, over the 92 to the Fan YouTube channel where you can watch this podcast if you so wish, and you can comment and leave your thoughts and hopefully praises, but also just your general opinions on different topics that we talked about throughout the show. You can also hit me up on X at Spencito_. Until next time, guys, take it easy. Have a great weekend and go Bucks.